she should never, ever be allowed on the streets ever again in life. We are clearly broken without him here. He was a piece of the puzzle that kept our family together.
They say a child should always protect their mother, but in this case, that bond turned into the weapon that shattered everything. It's a heartbreaking reality, which is why Shamez Brown, the woman you see in that interview, was so determined to bring justice to their family. Because sometimes the warning signs are already there, we just don't know when they'll explode. And unlike the crimes we've shared before, this one cuts deeper. The daughter didn't just kill her own mother. She went as far as to cover her in bleach, trying to wash away not just evidence, but guilt, history, and humanity. And if it weren't for that one phone call, the truth might have stayed buried. But before we get deeper into how this all spiraled out of control, let's go back. Because understanding the beginning might just explain how it all ended. For starters, Nicole Lowe's story begins in Cincinnati, Ohio, where she was born and raised. Like many kids, her early memories are a mix of both good and bad. One of her fondest memories from childhood was learning how to ride a bike. It was one of those moments that made her feel independent and free. A simple but joyous milestone that many can relate to.
First positive memory as a child?
Riding a bike, learning how to ride a bike.
But like many people's lives, Nicole's journey was far from perfect, and she quickly learned that things weren't always as they seemed. A major turning point in her life came when she discovered, at the age of 12, that the man she had believed was her father wasn't actually her biological dad. And for Nicole, this was a tough realization. Now, Nicole wasn't alone in growing up. She had siblings. 3 of them lived in the same house with her. Being the only girl in the family, she had her share of experiences that shaped who she was. She described herself as quiet, well-behaved, and a bit naive. Growing up, she wasn't the kind of kid who got into trouble or caused problems. In fact, she was pretty innocent for her age. Nicole said that she was always focused on being a good kid and doing what was expected of her. Life seemed to be going along smoothly, but as with many stories, life had other plans. When she reached middle school, things still seemed to be on track. She didn't face any major issues, and she did well enough academically. But it was high school where her life began to take a different turn. At the age of 16, Nicole became pregnant, and this moment changed the course of her education and future. With the weight of pregnancy, she made the decision to drop out of high school. Instead of continuing with her schooling, she decided to focus on raising her child. The challenges of pregnancy and motherhood at such a young age were overwhelming, but Nicole pushed through. She later went back to earn her GED, working hard to regain some sense of normalcy. However, Nicole's life continued to take unexpected and dark turns as she grew into adulthood. Though she initially avoided serious criminal activity, she did have a few run-ins with the law. These were minor offenses, things like receiving stolen property and participating in joyrides. They weren't the kind of crimes that would put her on anyone's radar, but they still marked the beginning of her struggles with the law. And these minor crimes would escalate in 2002 when Nicole became involved in a crime that would leave a man dead and forever alter the course of her life. The victim, Jeffrey Brown, was someone she knew well. They weren't just acquaintances or strangers. Nicole and Jeffrey were close friends. They worked near each other, and from the outside, it seemed like they had a regular friendship. But that wasn't the whole story. Behind the scenes, there were things going on in Nicole's life that no one could have known, and those secrets would eventually play a significant role in what happened that fateful day. Nicole was married at the time, and she had a husband and a friend who would also play critical roles in the crime. She met her husband on a chat line, something that was fairly common at the time, and the two developed a relationship that would later lead to criminal involvement. The third person involved in the situation was a friend of her husband's, someone she didn't know very well, but enough to trust them at that time. These 3 people, Nicole, her husband, and his friend, would be the ones involved in the crime that ended in murder. When asked to explain what happened, Nicole spoke openly about her role in the crime. She had been the one to set things up, though she never imagined things would turn out as badly as they did. At the time, she allegedly believed that her co-defendants were simply going to retrieve stolen drugs that had been taken from someone else. She thought the plan was to steal those drugs back, not to kill anyone. She didn't know that things would escalate to the point of a homicide. Nicole explained that she had given her co-defendants the key to Jeffrey's house, thinking they were going to take the drugs and leave without causing harm.
Do you know exactly how that was, set up or how that took place?
Well, I was in the car, so all I know is that I set it up pretty much, but I didn't know they was going to kill him. I thought he had stole some drugs from somebody else.
But in the end, that wasn't how it happened. The robbery turned deadly. Jeffrey Brown was shot and killed. Her actions, whether intentional or not, had played a crucial role in the events that unfolded. She had helped her co-defendants, covered their tracks, and kept quiet about the whole situation afterward. Even though she hadn't pulled the trigger, she had still helped make it happen. Whether she fully understood it or not, she knew that her actions would come with serious consequences, and deep down, she realized that she was just as responsible for the outcome. After the shooting, things didn't calm down quickly. The chaotic aftermath left Nicole in a state of shock and fear. She described what happened next in her account. She dropped her co-defendants off and went straight home. But her journey didn't end there. Once she was at home, she was faced with the grim task of cleaning the car. There was blood in the vehicle, a stark reminder of what had just occurred. Nicole had no idea what to do. She wasn't sure if her co-defendants had gotten rid of the evidence, like the weapons or the clothes they had worn during the crime, but she knew she had to act quickly to cover her tracks. In a panic, she tried to erase any trace of what had happened, but the reality of the situation set in. She was terrified, and she could feel the weight of the crime sinking in. Now, justice wasn't immediate. Nicole lived with the weight of what she had done for an entire year before the police finally caught up with her. In 2003, nearly 12 months after the crime, the police tracked her down and arrested her. The year-long gap between the crime and her arrest gave her time to reflect, but it also meant that she lived with constant anxiety and dread. Nicole was convicted for her role in the robbery turned murder. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Her co-defendants were also convicted, and each received a sentence of 10 years in prison, 2 years longer than Nicole's own sentence. According to Nicole, her mother visited her once a week, helping her stay connected to the outside world and providing her with much-needed emotional support. It was these visits that helped her cope with the isolation and loneliness that prison life often brings. During her time behind bars, Nicole kept a job, staying productive and trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. Before we continue, I want to hear your thoughts on her sentencing. Given her knowledge of the crime, do you honestly think 8 years was enough? This case is especially chilling because, according to police reports, Nicole had been in an intimate relationship with the victim. She used that trust to her advantage, robbing him in his own apartment. And tragically, her co-defendants ended up taking his life. So for her to walk away with only 8 years, that's beyond disturbing. It almost feels like a slap in the face to the victim and his family. What do you think? Was justice truly served? Drop your thoughts below. Fast forward to 2010, near the end of her 8-year sentence, Nicole wrote a letter to the prison officials expressing her remorse and promising to make amends. In the letter she wrote, "I will find a group so I can give back. I have hurt a lot of people, so I have a lot of making up to do." These words seemed sincere, as though Nicole had finally come to terms with her past and wanted to make things right. It appeared as though she was truly trying to change and make amends for the pain she had caused. She was about to be released from prison, and she hoped that by helping others, she could somehow begin to heal the wounds she had inflicted. But in a tragic twist, Nicole's promises of redemption turned out to be hollow. Less than 5 years after her release, Nicole Flagg, as she now went by, became involved in another violent crime that shocked everyone who knew her.
A woman accused of killing her own mother.
Today she stood before a judge. WLWT's Christy Davis is live in the newsroom now with the new information about the possible motive and the suspect. Christy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mark. Nicole Flagg has actually spent time in prison for killing someone before. Now she's accused of killing her own mother. 41-year-old Nicole Flagg made her way into the courtroom this morning. She turned herself in to officers yesterday. Now, officers found Flagg's mother, 61-year-old Mervinia Lowe, in her Montgomery Road apartment. Lowe's son asked police to check on her after calling his mother's cell phone and hearing an odd message on her voicemail.
According to the official reports, on the night of April 9, 2015, Nicole Flagg found herself being kicked out by her partner, Rahman. After dropping her off at her mother's apartment, Rahman handed her $150, and with nowhere to turn, Nicole reportedly spent the night alone in the woods. Early the following morning, on April 10th, Nicole reached out to a friend, Mr. Barwick, asking for a ride. When Barwick arrived, Nicole appeared at her mother's apartment, carrying her mother's cell phone and credit cards. She claimed she had taken them while someone had been doing laundry in the building. Barwick drove her to a place on Betts Avenue where Nicole sold the phone in exchange for crack cocaine. Later that morning, a neighbor reported seeing Nicole outside, smoking a cigarette and talking on the phone. Around 1:30 in the afternoon, Nicole told Barwick that she was leaving on foot to catch a bus, and at that time, she said her mother was fine. However, instead of traveling far, Nicole got off the bus early and met up with a drug dealer. She ended up back at a friend's house, where she used the money she had stolen from her mother to get high. That same day, Nicole's mother, Mervinia, who had been scheduled to begin her shift at 3 in the afternoon, didn't show up for work or call in. This was completely out of character for her, and friends and co-workers began calling, concerned. Their calls went unanswered, and even her voicemail greeting had been changed to rap music, an unsettling detail that raised red flags among those who knew her. By April 11th, suspicions surrounding Mervinia's whereabouts were escalating. Nicole, attempting to cover her tracks, began making calls. She asked Barwick to get rid of the stolen phone, fearing it might be tracked. That same day, she mowed Rahman's lawn and stayed inside, trying to avoid drawing attention to herself. Meanwhile, neighbors reported hearing arguing and shouting coming from Mervinia's apartment, although the timeline was unclear due to communication issues. The most disturbing details, however, came the following day, on April 12th. At precisely 12:37 in the morning, Maurice Allen, Mervinia's son, called the police to request a welfare check after he was unable to get in touch with his mother. When officers arrived, they found the door to the apartment locked and the apartment itself eerily silent. Upon entering, they discovered Mervinia's lifeless body. She had been brutally stabbed and partially covered in bleach, an apparent attempt to erase both the evidence and the guilt. Investigators immediately began piecing together the timeline, and by that same day, Nicolay was brought in for questioning. Her phone was seized, and by evening, police had recovered Mervinia's stolen phone, beginning to make connections between Nicole and the crime. Just over a week later, on April 23, 2015, Nicole Flagg was arrested and charged with the murder of her mother. The motive for the crime was chillingly simple: robbery, driven by Nicole's addiction. The woman who had once called Mervinia Mom had stolen from her, taken her life, and tried to cover up her actions with chemicals and lies. What made this case even more disturbing was the fact that Nicole kept insisting on her innocence despite overwhelming evidence pointing to the opposite. She even denied putting bleach on the victim, yet the official reports told a chilling story. The victim was found lying on the kitchen floor in a twisted position. Her face was almost planted face down on the floor, though her body was on her right side. Her legs were crossed near the ankle, and her hair was tied into a ponytail, held by a silver barrette. She was dressed in jeans and long johns, which had been pulled down to her hip bone. Over her torso, she wore a plaid shirt turned inside out, with a second shirt underneath it. She had no shoes or socks. Blood was visible on both the top and bottom of her feet, a haunting detail that added to the growing list of unsettling signs. The blood splatter was not confined to just the victim. It was visible all over the kitchen. The sink, stove, microwave stand, a dinner plate on the table, kitchen curtains, and even the stereo stand and its knob all bore evidence of the violence that had unfolded. It was clear that she had been drenched in bleach. Her clothes were stained, and the pungent odor of bleach filled the air. Underneath her, 2 clear plastic bags lay, and when removed, a pool of bleach was visible on the floor. The door under the kitchen sink was left ajar, and a black and white lunch bag, still with a sandwich inside, sat on the counter, next to a tomato with a knife stabbed into it. Another strange detail was a drawer of the victim's dresser that was open, containing nothing but underwear and bras. To further emphasize the crime scene's grim reality, special lighting was used to highlight areas where bleach had been poured or used to wipe down walls, including places where bleach had been touched. As the coroner's office collected evidence, it was found that medicine had been taken from the microwave area of the kitchen. Dr. Lumen arrived at the scene prior to the autopsy, with detectives Knecht, Gregory, and Karagulev attending the autopsy later on. The autopsy revealed a horrific scene. The victim had suffered 11 stab wounds to her back. Most were superficial, but a few were deep, particularly one located on her upper left side. These stab wounds, striking from right to left, suggested the attacker was likely right-handed. In addition to the stab wounds, there were scratch marks on her right breast area and under her jawline, as well as cuts inside both her upper and lower lips. A scratch, which seemed to start at her eyebrow and ran down her face to her mouth, was also found. The injuries didn't stop there. She had a deep stab wound behind her right ear, another large cut to her right ear, and a stab wound to the right side of her neck. Most disturbingly, a defensive wound was found on her right middle finger. Other strange details began to emerge. The victim's house keys, car keys, and cell phone were missing, and no money or credit cards were found in the house. The only thing left on her person was a gold necklace, a tragic reminder of her life before this brutal attack. A rape exam was conducted by the coroner, further compounding the horror. The victim's car, a maroon Hyundai Accent, was towed for processing. It didn't take long before palm prints and a right index fingerprint belonging to Nicole Flagg were found on the outside of the driver's side door. This was significant, especially considering that the weather during the week of the homicide was stormy, with the first decent day being on the 10th of April. Additionally, Denisha Gooden's left thumbprint was located on the rear window of the car. Nicole Flagg's story started to unravel during a taped interview. She claimed she took the bus to her mother's house on Friday morning, arriving at 11 a.m. She said her boyfriend left for work around 6 a.m. and that she spent the day at her mother's house, doing her mother's hair and flat ironing it. She mentioned bringing her 2 joints with her and then leaving at around 1:10 of a.m. She claimed to have caught a bus at 1:41 p.m. and got off at Seymour near Cincinnati Gardens to meet her friend Lo at the Sunoco. After buying $40 worth of crack, she was dropped back off at her boyfriend's house. There, she brushed her teeth, put in eye drops, and said that she knew her mom keeps everything in her bra. She also mentioned calling her mom around noon on Saturday, though there was no clear answer from her mother. This interview, along with her odd claims, left investigators suspicious. Pictures of a scratch on Nicole's hand were taken by Officer Gormley, and a DNA swab was collected from her. Her phone was seized and held for later examination. Interviews with others close to Nicole, including Betty Swan, Candy Loudermilk, and Orenthal Tate, helped to piece together a clearer picture. Detective Knecht contacted Lo, who later admitted to receiving a cell phone from Nicole, which led to more inconsistencies in Nicole's version of events. As more information came in, investigators learned that Nicole had been in contact with various people the day before the murder, including Lo, whose cell phone records confirmed their interactions. Her phone also contained several disturbing messages, including a text sent in the early hours of April 10th, where she mentioned being at her mom's house and then later sent messages regarding her whereabouts and actions. A search warrant for Lowe's phone revealed even more inconsistencies in Nicole's story. By April 21st, Nicole's story had completely unraveled, and she was arrested and charged with aggravated murder after confessing to the crime during a second interview. As investigators continued to gather evidence, a search of Nicole's apartment revealed more damning details, including socks stained with bleach and a pocket knife belonging to Nicole that had been hidden in her mother's bathroom. Her past relationship with her mother, as well as her history of manipulation and theft, began to emerge as key factors in the crime. This would soon lead to a final, tragic revelation, one that would forever haunt those who knew her. As of now, Nicole Flagg was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Identified as inmate number W097334, she is serving a life sentence along with an additional 15 years for aggravated robbery, tampering with evidence, and gross abuse of a corpse, crimes that added to the gruesomeness of the case and revealed a deeper level of planning and disregard for human life. Despite her repeated claims of innocence, the evidence was undeniable. Her fingerprints and DNA were found at the crime scene, directly contradicting her story. Prosecutors presented a strong case, painting a picture of a daughter who was not only manipulative, but also driven by addiction and desperation. The courtroom was filled with emotion as Judge Stephen Martin, under docket number B1502174, handed down the sentence in Hamilton County, Ohio. The judge didn't hold back, emphasizing the brutality of the act and the utter betrayal of maternal trust. Flagg showed little remorse during the trial, and many described her demeanor as cold and detached. Her legal team's appeals have so far been unsuccessful, and the court documents, now public, detail the extensive efforts made by law enforcement and forensic experts to bring the truth to light. Today, Nicole remains behind bars with no hope for freedom, her name forever tied to one of Ohio's most disturbing family murders. Now I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Nicole's punishment was too harsh or not harsh enough? Life in prison means she'll never walk free again, but some people believe that what she did was so cruel and calculated that only the death sentence would have been fitting. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've made it this far, be sure to check out this next video. I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you once again for watching,